G'day there, Mick Meredith here, comedian, musician and podcaster, and I'm doing the opening spot on the Andy Social podcast. He's coming up in a minute, settle down. If you don't know me, Mick Meredith, I tell jokes and sing songs. I've put out a couple of tunes recently on Spotify, one called Rod, all about my girlfriend's love for another man. Oh yeah, that's funny, we all laugh about it. Another tune about turning 50 called Hitting the Half Century and Growing Old Disgracefully. So check them out on Spotify or whatever platform you listen to. Got some other projects coming up soon. A new song coming out called Where's the Effing Remote Control? I think we can all relate to that. But right now, tune your ears in to the Andy Social Podcast. Cheers, big ears.
G'day, Andy Socialites. It's Jeremy Big Jez Turner here. I'm just coming in with a quick plug for me mate Andy because he's running a fucking sweet deal over at his Patreon account at the moment. So I've been a member of it for a few months now. It's always been a pretty entertaining little listen on a Tuesday morning, I think it is. He does a heap of shitty karaoke. He'll tell us a whole bunch of things about random shit that he's researched in the last week. He'll tell you a little bit about what's going on in the world of the man himself, Andy Dowling. My personal favourite part is his mission to offset his impending alcoholism with getting his steps up on his iPhone. It's just all round good fucking fun. In any case, you can join for as little as $1 a month. Of course, that $1 a month is a slap in the face tier, so if you're feeling even halfway flush, you should probably go for the $5 jobby, and in return you get a whole heap of sweet extra content, and he gets to keep doing his thing, and then maybe at some point in the next fucking decade, we'll get another Lord album. And in any case, like $5 is pretty much nothing. If you live in Sydney, or even worse, if you live in fucking Melbourne, $5 is somewhere between a third and half of a schooner in most pubs. So it's a pretty sweet deal, and it goes a long way to help Andy keep pumping out the good shit we all like. Anyway, thanks for listening. Enjoy the podcast. All right.
Hey, Happy New Year 2021. Here we go. Oh, it's going to be a better year. Hopefully, fingers crossed. 257, that's the episode number this week. We're going to kick off the new year with a comedian. This week's guest is Drew Bensley. Drew is a comedian, as I just mentioned. He's originally from Queanbeyan and these days living in Sydney, based out of Sydney. He is one of the co-hosts of the Community Noseboard podcast. You can go to communitynoseboard.com.au. Drew's on all the socials. He'll be out and about doing shows whenever we can get out and do more shows. So I'll have links to Drew's socials, Instagram, Twitter, etc., Facebook, all in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. Make sure you go and subscribe and follow the Community Noticeboard podcast, if I can spit it out, on your podcast player. So whatever you're listening to this through right now, go and search for it, subscribe, follow, etc. Go and listen to it. Great podcast and a great chat with Drew. Drew came over to my place a few weeks ago and we had a weird Greek beer and just talk shit. And it was absolutely fantastic. Loved it. And hopefully not the last one. So here we go. Great way to kick off 2021. Please enjoy this great episode with Drew Bensley.
That's it.
Oh,
That's it.
So maybe the first section can be just me talking to myself. This is how long it's been since I've actually done a in-person chat for the podcast because I'm used to just doing everything.
Doing the old Zoom.
Oh, fuck Zoom, man. That's
no good.
No.
That's why, like you said, do you want to still do it? And I was like, I'd much rather come over than set up the Zoom. I feel so awkward doing those things.
I don't know where to. I mean, it's always a bit socially awkward when you do things in person anyway, especially when you're doing something like this where if you didn't have the podcast thing, you could just sit down and just talk shit.
Yeah, exactly.
But now you kind of got to not put it on, but you're just aware that
100%.
It's being recorded.
Yeah. I gave away your address within 5 seconds. Yeah, that's right. I just thought I probably shouldn't have said that.
That's all right. I put enough shit on social media. I think everyone's worked out where I live now.
Yeah.
But I think with the Zoom stuff, it's like this extra level of awkwardness where I don't know where to put my eyes, and then I'm looking down, and then they're sort of looking at you. And I think because the screen's in, like you're both looking at the screen, you sort of feel obliged to be just locked in the entire
100%,
time
yeah.
and try to be animated and,
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, it's
Just you can see yourself. That's the problem, is you can see yourself in the bottom, and that's enough. Like if you know, if there was a mirror behind you right now, I'd be freaking out. Like, if I could see myself, Christ,
should have moved
is that
around a
what you
bit
look
and
like?
grabbed the mirror.
Yeah.
It's been weird this year. You know, even like sort of work stuff, just everything's Zoom and everything's just
Oh yeah,
it's just exhausting.
I never got the work from home or anything. I've been in the office the whole time. So
Oh
it's-
really? Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that's different for me is just going outside. Like the streets are empty, and then one day they're busy again. I'm like, I guess people working at work again.
Yeah. And I don't know what's going to happen now. I mean, it's kind of good that it's Christmas because at least it's going to be quiet anyway.
Oh
But-
yeah. Well, I was supposed to go to I'm supposed to still go to Queensland on next Thursday, but we'll see how that fucking goes.
Well, I saw a post about an hour ago from just a reporter on Twitter, and he was saying that apparently, as of 1 a.m. tomorrow morning,
Right.
I think anyone in New South Wales needs the border
Like a
permit thing,
Okay.
and anyone from the Northern Beaches needs some sort of special
Right.
permission to be able to go over the border, and then they need to go into immediate quarantine after that.
Good Lord.
So good luck. Find out what you need to do. Yeah, ASAP.
About time we've quarantined the Northern Beaches from the rest of Australia.
There's a good picture I saw yesterday where someone had posted a picture of the Spit Bridge being up.
Yeah.
And says, just keep it up.
Oh, fuck no. I always say that because I've only lived in Sydney for 4 years or something, three or 4 years, and so my knowledge of the Northern Beaches is purely through like true crime podcasts.
Oh, right.
And as best I can tell, everyone who lives up there is a fucking psycho who's in each other's business and just murdering and sleeping with high school students. It's fucking it seems fucked.
Someone sent me an article the other day because I've got my Patreon podcast I do, and it's just me talking shit for an hour, and I just look at shit on the internet and play some old school television commercials, like just through the old Zoom.
Bit of 1332.
Yeah, oh, that's in there, mate. It's in there. It's in there. That's the go-to.
Fucking oath.
And someone sent me an article about this guy from, it must have been the 50s. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a really successful comic book artist in the 50s, and he did a bunch of popular comics, but he ended up getting
Stan
charged.
Lee.
So I was like, oh, hang on. I think I've heard that name elsewhere.
Literally the only comic book guy I know. It's like him and the Watchmen guy, whoever his name is, Alan someone.
No, well, you're 1.5 ahead of me. At least I'm hopeless with that stuff. But this guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but he got convicted for rape. And what he was doing is he was taking photos of like 15, 16-year-old girls, like for swimsuit catalogs or whatever, and he'd take them into the bush and take these photos and whatever. But eventually he held them at gunpoint, roped them up and all this sort of stuff. And he got convicted and he went to jail, and this was like 1954 because I think it was the year that the death penalty was removed in Australia. Right. Or at least New South
he was
Wales.
an Australian guy.
Yeah, this is Northern Beaches. This is what made me think of it. Yeah,
right, okay.
He was like Manly or something like that, and so he missed out on the death penalty. He was meant to be sentenced to death. Death penalty got removed, so he ended up going to prison for like something like 15, 16 years. He gets released. He does his term. Within 6 months, he murders and rapes 2 girls.
Oh, my Lord.
And then he ended up going back to prison and then died in Grafton in like the beginning of like the 2000s or something like that.
Fucking hell. Raise the bridge. Keep it up.
And I was like, oh, wow, the local...
Yeah, far out. I'm going to look that up, actually.
Yeah. Everyone's saying South Australia are the ones with the reputation of all their...
yeah, well, I mean, they're
loonies.
They are certainly, punching above their weight, I think, population of serial killer wise, but...
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Oh, man.
So now I'm on a little bit of a mission to see what kind of crackpots and crazy people and just like degenerates have lived in Sydney over the years.
Man, so many.
Yeah.
You'll find, like, I remember some guy, I can't think of his name now, it was like, they called him like China or something, like something where it was definitely racist.
Okay.
But it was it was like the 20s and
Yeah.
everybody was super racist, but he had a nickname or something like that. And yeah, he was a dude who lived in Chippendale who was just a fucking psycho, but he was
Really?
like, he was a gangster, but it was like the classic, like almost like the romantic version of the gangster where he's like got the kids and he's very lovely to his wife and nice to the kids and everyone loves him, but then he goes out and he's like putting a fucking brick through the back of somebody's head because they slighted him at a bar or something. Yeah, I'll find I'll think of his name and I'll send you.
All right,
I love
cool.
all that kind of true crimey shit. I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Such a cliche. Like everyone loves it now, but
I haven't really sort of dug into a lot of it. I think I'm finding an interest now in it based on sort of location and thinking like, because I can walk around the city and sort of find landmarks and go, oh, that was what was mentioned in that story.
Yeah.
But like Jess is like obsessed with it. Like she grew up like with Serial Killer Sundays and would watch it with her dad, you know, on Foxtel and whatever, like family bonding time.
Yeah,
like,
no, I remember watching
crazy.
it with my mom. Yeah.
Yeah, and so she loves that stuff. She's watching all the Netflix docos and all that. But yeah, so for me, it's like, okay, who's been around the traps? I think the next person, I can't remember this person's name, but they were sort of they lived in sort of King's Cross, Darlinghurst, in the 60s, 70s, I think. I can't remember her name, but she was known as like something like it was like the King's Cross witch, right? And she was just this like really sort of out there eccentric character who got into all this sort of occult stuff. And
I think I've heard this.
And apparently there's an actual plaque on like Darlinghurst Road or something like that in tribute to her, and it got put in there in sort of the 90s or whatever.
Right, okay.
And there's a massive Wikipedia entry about it. So I was reading about it, like, okay, I'm gonna look into this. And apparently she's written a bunch of books and she was an artist as well. But her books got banned because back in whatever it was, the 60s or whatever, just totally conservative here, just really heavily sort of Christian sort of society, and so she was just attacked all the time, and the cops were trying to ping her for what was the term? It's like when you don't have a job and you're not earning money, and
stand-up comedy.
Ding ding ding! You're going straight to jail. It's like somebody who like squats. It's a term for squatters, but it starts with like a V or something like that.
Oh, vagrancy.
Vagrancy or something like that. And so that was a big thing back in like the 50s and 60s, or probably even earlier. And so that would be a reason for them to lock people up, just to say, look, you're a vagrant. You're just wandering around and you're up to no good.
It's so funny because like that, I reckon I could name 10 people that are that lady now, but nobody cares. It's just like they just hang out at the fucking courthouse hotel. Like, you know what I mean? But back in the 60s, that was such a scandal. She's got her own Wikipedia article.
And I think it's like anything, you know, when somebody's, you know, banned or their work's banned, it becomes popular. Yeah, it's just like the rebellious sort of thing. Like
Absolutely.
Everyone wants it and they want to know what's going on.
As soon as you're not allowed to do something, there's a segment of people that just have to do that.
It's like that reverse psychology on a child.
Yes,
you can't do 100%, this. I'm definitely going to do it now.
Yeah, well, now I am.
Now, little Johnny, you can take drugs. You can take as many as you want. Go hard. They're great.
No.
Cross your fingers and just
I'm going to become an accountant.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I'm going to look into that. And
you'd have that here, especially because you're, I mean, not super close, but you're certainly walkable to like the rocks. And I love, like, you know, in the early part of like the Sydney like colony days, the rocks was like the fucking gang capital. Like that's where all the crime was. You go around, there's like the plaques on the walls and stuff. We're talking about all the different, like, you know, the weird, it's like gangs in New York shit.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's cool.
And I think where Barangaroo Reserve is, that's all been redeveloped. Up the top there's a bunch of really old terrace houses. Yep. And apparently when that area was, you know, sort of a shipyard and bring stuff in, they would put the workers in these houses, but these guys were like bottom of the food chain. They were just degenerate, just absolute scumfucks. Like they were just the cretins of society. And they
I've met a FIFO worker.
and I'm just looking and going, man, like, for somebody that is at the bottom of the food chain in society to be somewhere where now we class that as prime real estate,
Yeah,
like,
it's
you know, the
crazy.
views of the harbour, like
Yeah.
an amazing place. But back then it probably would have been horrible.
It was just trash, yeah.
Yeah, and it probably was disgusting. The hygiene would have been,
Yeah.
wouldn't have been any. And yeah, but now you just walk past and, I mean, who knows what those places are worth. They're
Oh my
heritage
God.
listed and they're just,
Squillions.
yeah.
Yeah, I read a book like about a month ago that was it's called Leviathan, and it's sort of like a history of Sydney, but it's like, I think the author John Birmingham, he died with a falafel in his hand.
Oh,
Have you
yeah,
ever
yeah,
seen
yeah.
that movie? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he kind of he does it like almost like a Howard Zinn People's History of the US, but for Sydney, and kind of like focuses on the city as just being this like corrupt cesspool from day dot, essentially, you know, from the horrific treatment of the indigenous people right through to just people like just gangsters buying up land and just, you know, knocking down whatever they want to build a big building and fucking that was the thesis of the book. It's like, it was bad then, it's just run by fucking crooks to this day, but a lot of it was talking about, you're reading about these locations, you know, down George Street and stuff, that were just filthy death traps, just nobody, just scum of the earth, just bad hygiene, disease, just like absolute filth. And I'm standing there like, this is a nice part of town. Like, you know, there's a beautiful fucking theatre there.
Yeah,
But it was just like,
it's weird.
yeah.
It's such a trip, and you're right. Like, I mean, I guess the whole concept of nothing's really changed, and if anything, people just either hide it or they've got a little bit more class around how they conduct their work.
Yeah.
But it's amazing just to think of just how polarizing it is now, because, you know, this part of the city or just the world or whatever is just like so sought after.
Absolutely.
But back then you probably had to, well, people had no choice, since it was like, no, this is what I'm dealt with, and I'm just going to have to live in this hellhole. I've noticed a bit of that sort of getting around, so because I do heaps of walking around the area, and there's lots of plaques and lots of things at history, and the Piedmont wharfs here, like they just used to bring in all the cargo and migrants coming in as well, so they'd all get off around sort of Piedmont wharfs, and it's just wild. It's like the Wild West or the Wild East or whatever it is. There was not that this is going to be a fucking history of Sydney podcast.
I know. I was just thinking, like, this is not what I expected to be talking to you about, but I mean, I'm happy to.
Whatever, we'll just go with it. But while it's in my head, there's a really cool podcast called Buried Files or something like that, and it's done by the State Library, and it's all about the old cemeteries that were at Surrey Hills and Central Station.
Right.
So before Central Station was built, that was all a cemetery.
True. Okay.
And so they had to exhume all the graves. They moved, I don't know exactly what it was, but they moved some of them out to Rookwood, and they moved the rest out to Bronte. And there was all sorts of issues, like you know, there was grave robbing, there's disease, you know, and even when they built Central Station, they were still finding graves. And even now, when they've been building the new metro, they're still finding
Oh my lord!
skeletons and
That's
remains
so
in there.
creepy.
So they have to get like the Historical Society or whoever to. They have to pause everything, and they have to carefully go and document it, exhume everything properly, get all the information first before, you know, these companies are allowed to get back in there and just rip the earth apart.
Far out.
But apparently it was like huge, massive cemetery, and it went all up sort of Devonshire Street into Surrey Hills, and this podcast is all about the cemeteries and just how gangster that part of the town was as well. Like Surrey Hills was like, it was like King's Cross, but like next level, like just the worst King's Cross has ever been, like times 100, and just all
like
these stories.
Peaky Blinders shit.
Oh,
The only grave related thing that I always thought was like a fun fact I figured out was like I investigated, I like read it in the paper, but the Camperdown Park that is very popular, you know, you go there on almost any afternoon on a sunny day, there's going to be hundreds of people there enjoying themselves, picnic blanket, drinking a beer, whatever, and then in the middle is that very old graveyard. So the headstones are confined to that area, but they never move the bodies. The bodies are under where you're sitting. Like, the whole thing used to be a graveyard. They moved the headstones, but you're just sitting there enjoying yourself on a beautiful sunny day,
just a bunch of
right on top of someone's great grandma.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, apparently apparently because one of the things they were saying is that never really had a system with how to bury people, and so it was just all really crude. They just had, you know, if people could afford boxes, they could. Otherwise, they were just chucked into the earth. And depending on your class and how much money you had, determined what kind of burial you would get. So even now, they just continue to find just remains.
Yeah, crazy.
Just so many people.
That's why I'm surprised. Like, I'm a cremation guy all the way.
Yeah.
Burn it up.
Yep.
Throw it in the ocean, whatever. I'm terrified of dying and then waking up like 3 years later in a coffin, you know, like that enough scares the shit out of me. I'm like, cremate the fuck out of me, chop my head off, like make sure I'm dead.
I just remember watching like shows as a kid, like just some sort of fiction stuff, and you know, it'd be like some medieval part. I can't remember what this was because it's so grim. It couldn't have been a kid's show. Maybe it was like one of those sort of interim teenage sort of thing, 15 plus or something like that.
Make sure you're watching with a parent in the room.
Yeah. And I just remember one where somebody had been buried in a coffin. It was sort of like medieval times or whatever, and they had the bell inside the coffin. And then they had the person on sort of graveyard shift, and so then, you know, these people would go into a coma and they think they're dead, and so they bury them, put full burial, and then they would wake up days, weeks, or whatever later, and so then they find themselves trapped in this coffin. So they had to have these bells, because before that they were just banging on the thing, and so these guys who were doing graveyard shifts would just have to listen out and just in the hope that they could hear something, because apparently it happened quite often. And I'm just like,
that's
just
terrifying.
That's incinerate me.
100%. Even if I'm showing signs, especially if I'm showing signs of life, throw me in the oven. Just like, I do not want to fucking wake up.
Nothing good is going to come by you coming back to life. If you got to that point where people actually think you're dead, it's probably best that you just stay
absolutely.
away. There's nothing positive that's going to come back from that. Yeah,
100%.
So how long? Because I know you're originally from Canberra.
Queanbeyan, New South Wales, baby.
Just to be a little bit more.
I did live in Canberra for 2 years.
Okay. Oh, that's what I meant. Yeah. Okay. So how long have you been sort of living in like the city sort of area? Because you're not too far from me.
No.
Bit...
So I moved there in March this year, but before that I lived with former guest of the pod, Nat.
Oh yeah.
For many years, and we lived in Newtown, and I sort of bounced around there, and then just literally like the week before lockdown moved into a new place that thankfully had a balcony, because my old place was like your stereotypical cliche shoebox in a West, too expensive.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like just hot, no air conditioning. For some reason, you're not allowed to open the window, so they put fucking nails in the window because it's like illegal. It's illegal to have a window above a certain height.
Oh, just in case people jump out or something?
Well, kids, I guess. Yeah. But it's illegal if you have a fly screen. And so instead of just installing a fucking fly screen, the landlord fucking puts a nail in there, so it's like 40 degrees and your window opens 2 inches. But yeah, so I moved here in 2017. Yeah, so 3 years, coming up on 4 years now.
Yeah, I think because I'm originally from Brisbane, and cool. I moved to moved down here. I
used to live in Caboolture for a little while.
Really?
Oh yeah. Now,
all right, so a slight tangent. So when I moved to Sydney, because I lived in Redcliffe.
Yep.
Was born there, and sort of growing up.
The Bee Gees?
Sorry?
Is Redcliffe the Bee Gees?
Yeah. Claim to fame. That walk?
Like a mural. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Spent a hell of a lot of money on that. Ooh. Don't know if they've had their money back yet, but anyway. But yeah, growing up there, Caboolture, because it was the Caboolture Shire.
Yeah.
And Caboolture was just always like, probably a little bit better than Mount Druitt or something like that. It was just that sort of vibe.
Oh yeah, pretty rough.
And then when I came down here, and I lived in Marrickville for the first couple of years, and people were talking about the Shire here. Right. And I'm thinking like, ugh, they're gross. And everyone's like, no, the Shire rules. Like, these are people that grew up in the Shire.
Yeah.
And so I went out there and I go, it's not as bad as what I remember the Caboolture Shire being, but it was just a total different interpretation, because if you mention the Shire in Brisbane, everyone would be like, I don't know about that. But down here, it's like, well, it's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
If
people like to make fun of it.
Yeah. It's an easy target.
Yeah, but it is beautiful down there.
Yeah, so
Aside from the race riot, the occasional race
oh,
riot.
just turn a blind eye, I lived in Cronulla for a year at one point, and we were right down near the beach, like a couple of streets back from Northies, and we were there. It must have been the first year anniversary after the riots,
Yeah.
and the amount of cops there, because they were just expecting that people were just going to come down and celebrate or something. I don't know. It was just insane.
Wow.
And so we just stayed indoors. We're just like, we're not going out. There's just no way we're going to just get caught in the crossfire. Or,
Man, half the fucking cops are probably in the riot with
They
a fake
probably
mustache
were.
on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, some fake glasses with the mustache. Doodaloo. Yeah, but when I moved down here, sort of living in Marrickville, and then and sort of darted around the place. But I've been in here in Piedmont since August last year.
Okay.
And this is the closest I've been. I mean, I don't know how much closer I can really be. I'm pretty.
I mean, this is the doorstep of the city, really.
Yeah.
It's a good spot. Man.
It's awesome. It got so lucky. Didn't expect it. Because we were living down the coast for a couple of years, and we're planning to move back up. And I sort of thought, oh, maybe Inner West or maybe Leichhardt, Annandale, something like that.
Yeah.
If I'm lucky, and then we just stumbled across this at the right time. But like it's nice, but I'm sure it's the same for you. It's still wild. Like,
Yeah.
There's still a lot of craziness that's going on.
Absolutely.
Like even this morning I went for a walk to Coles, and there's a little park down the end of the street here. There's an ambulance there. There's a paddy wagon. There's a bunch of cops. There's one guy sitting down on the ground, cross-legged, with another sort of random guy. And then there's 7, what I would think, undercover police officers or something. I don't know, but they're all dressed in suits, and they're all standing over this person who's just sitting there with his head down, cross-legged on the ground in the little park. This is like, I don't know, 8:30 in the morning. I'm thinking, Jesus, what's going on? But it's just, there's always something going on around here. Just people screaming, carrying on. Like,
Did you like try to figure it out? Like, did you just stop and ask anyone what was going on?
No. Everyone sort of had their head down.
I'm
and
so cute. I'm such a sticky beak, I need to know what's going on at all times.
I kind of want to walk through and just like go,
Yeah.
sorry, guys. Like,
Excuse me. I live right, so my balcony essentially overlooks a park that is next to the Surrey Hills Cop Shop.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so there's, one night, I think I just woke up at 4, like just in the middle of the night, just woke up at like 4 a.m. and went and just sat out there for half an hour. And someone was just in the park who from their ranting and raving to themselves, I gathered they'd been arrested and they were just released, but like really late. But they were just yelling to nobody, just going, fucking fuck the cops, these fucking cops. And like, for like a good half an hour. And I just I just sat there and just like, what's going on here? What's the backstory?
Well, I've gotten to not really actually get to know them, but there are some regular characters in the area that are just always walking around. There's a guy with dreadlocks who just walks at the same pace. It's just, I've never seen him walk any slower or any faster.
You're right.
Just the same pace, and his head's always down, and he's just always walking. I never see him stop.
Yeah.
The only time I see him stop is at the lights to try and cross the road, but otherwise he's always on the he's always on the go.
Even then, he's jogging on the spot.
Yeah, that's right. Trying to keep the heart rate up.
Yeah.
But he can always find a butt of a cigarette. He's got that going.
Got the instinct.
But just deadpan look, and he's just in another world.
Yeah.
Like Twilight Zone, just walking around.
I
There's
love
a few people like that.
Yeah, man, they're so interesting.
Yeah.
And just I always want to see, in a movie or something where you get to see someone and then the backstory of how they came to be, like an origin story.
Yeah, it's like, how did you get here?
Yeah,
Like, what was the turning point?
Absolutely. There's a lady in Canberra who I remember the first time thinking, like, it was one of those things where you realize just by virtue of aging, how the fucking world works. And it's the first time, like, there's a few things that make you realize that you're getting old.
Yeah.
The big ones for me were like when I'm just a big NRL head. The first time I just remember being like, seeing a huge unit and being like, this guy fucking rules. And then it's like, he's 18 years old. And just being like, Jesus Christ, this is, this kid, this is a child.
Yeah.
And he's fucking a massive unit. And the other one was, there used to be a great pub in Canberra, probably the only really good pub in the city, called the Phoenix Bar. And they did a lot of live music and it was just a good time. They shut down a couple of years ago, but there was a regular there, and she was lovely, but she's, you know, a regular pub. She's getting drunk every night. You know, she's got some issues or whatever. She was like a nice enough person, and I remember seeing her drink every time I went there. She was there, and I'd say hello or whatever. And then a couple of years after, this is probably 5 years ago, being back in Canberra and seeing her walk through. But she was like she was talking to herself. She was
really? Wow.
The full descent into crazy person. And it was one of those things where I was like, I've always seen crazy people getting around, but I've never seen the pre-crazy and then done the full transition. Like, oh, fuck, this is how it happens. Like, this is someone who's just
a gradual decline.
Exactly,
just based off just decisions.
Yeah, Well, clearly, you know, she had whatever was going on. But like, it's sad to see, but it was just one. Yeah, I remember just being like, oh, fuck, that's how that happens.
Yeah.
For every person, every dreadlock, same pace guy, you know, he was someone's friend when when he was 15. It's crazy.
That's it.
Blows my mind.
It's it's such a. And I think it's probably the same over your way as well. And it's a really good thing because they integrate a lot of the public housing, which is private residential, instead of just having large sections.
A ghetto.
A ghetto basically. Yeah, and so. It's good because it just lifts everybody up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely adds an extra
bit of flavour to the
to
the neighbourhood.
It definitely does. There's just certain times of the day, it might just be people are just they haven't got their fix or whatever it might be, and so people just get a little bit loose and a bit crazy. And especially here because we've got a car park over here near us, and so especially like on the weekends, so everyone parks there, goes in the city, has a big night, and so they'll eventually get back here to try and get their car and drive home.
Yeah.
And that's where all the tears happen. This is where, where you're out and you might have one person who's the designated driver in the group or whatever, but somebody gets into a fight or there's a breakup or whatever it is. That all takes place at the car park in the entrance.
You got front row seats.
Oh, and it's just, it sucks sometimes because it's like, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and you're just like, I just need to sleep, please. It'd be like midweek, and I'm like, come on, guys, like, surely you've got jobs to go to. Like, oh, come on, please, let me just sleep for an extra hour. Come on. But it's fun. It's like really exciting because there's just always something happening around here.
You're like relatively close to. Do you remember 2 years ago someone killed someone with a fucking samurai sword in Glebe?
Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
I was reading about, because I think there was something to trial, or someone got acquitted. I think it was like an accessory, but maybe she got acquitted or something. It was, for whatever reason, it was back in the news like about a week ago, and I was like, fuck, that is, I mean, it's kind of close to here, but it's still like down near the Forest Lodge Hotel.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
It's insane.
It's a colourful place. Jeez. There's a few areas, little pockets in Glebe where it's like, oh, okay, that's right. I mean, this really nice street, beautiful houses, very affluent, and then sort of like one street over, and it's like, oh, I think I've walked too far. I don't know if I should be here.
100%.
Really, very, very much a melting pot over there. But there's the park. I can't remember the park, but it sort of separates Piermont and Glebe, Wentworth Park or whatever it is.
Another one.
There's a guy in his 30s or whatever who got bashed by a bunch of 15-year-olds earlier this year, I think it was, and like severely. And apparently it was like 7 o'clock in the evening or something like that. And I'm like, I walk around there, like, what the hell? And I'm just thinking, and I always go, oh, just these young kids, like I could take them on.
Yeah,
it's like, no way.
They'll flog you, man.
They'll flog me big time. Yeah, so there's always a little bit of darkness around the place, but it certainly makes things interesting. There's always something going on.
I've noticed that since moving to Sydney, my geography of the city, I'm slowly getting better at knowing. There was a few places where I just had no idea, but I try to get out and explore the city a little bit. But my geography has become purely pub based. Like if I meet someone and they're like, "Where are you from?" and they'll tell me, and I'm like, that's the nearest pub.
Yeah.
Because I love Sydney pubs so much. Just they're a good time.
Man, I've got this book. I'm pretty sure I've still got it. It's like the Guide to Sydney Pubs. It was, where like back in the 90s or whatever, where there was just all these novelty books that you'd buy from like Book World or whatever, and they were usually in the bargain bin. It was one of those books, and I was just highlighting them as I was going through, and I'm like, oh, I'm finding all these pubs. It's fantastic. And then some of the pubs no longer exist. But when I moved here, I just thought, okay, I'm I've got to road test them all.
Try
I mean,
them
I've got
out.
to know which one's going to be my local.
Yep.
I still haven't worked that out, by the way. I've still got to taste test
Lord
everything.
Wolseley, is that one near?
Where's that one? Yeah, that sounds
I think
familiar.
it's like a couple of streets that way, and then there's like the Quarryman's.
Yeah, Quarryman's just down here, and then we've got
Edinburgh?
Dunkirk, which is like whatever, but that's there. Piedmont Point Hotel,
Piedmont Bridge Hotel, is it?
Piedmont Bridge Hotel, Terminus. Yeah, there's heaps.
Yeah.
There's heaps. And then the other day I was walking over to Surrey Hills, and then I mean I don't go there often, but I just realised how few pubs I've actually been to over there. I'm just like, oh my god, like you just walk down this like tiny little, beautiful little residential quiet street. And it's just a pub there.
Yeah, on the corner.
And I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's
Some
just,
cool ones.
It's awesome. It's so good. So yeah, I'm similar to you, but I use that. People listen to this podcast. They're like, oh, here we go. Andy's going to talk about this fucking app again. There's an app called Untapped,
Right.
which is a beer app.
Okay.
And I was joking to you before about sort of trying lots of different beers and
Yeah,
sort of like Pokemon Go. This is like Pokemon Go. And so what you do is you'll have a beer, and I'll probably should do this before I forget after this podcast. I won't interrupt the podcast now, but
The old Fix Hellas.
yeah, so I'll look it up and I'll find the beer in there, and it should be in the database. It's sort of user sort of, you can contribute to it, and you check in, you take a photo of it, you rate it out of 5, you mark the location of where you're drinking it and where you've bought it from.
Right.
And it's like, okay, whatever, and sort of keeps a track of what you're drinking. But then the addictive part is that you get badges.
Okay.
So if you drink 5 lagers, you get a lager badge.
Right.
And then when you drink 10 lagers, you go to level 2 of the lager badge.
Yeah.
And then if you drink
If you drink 20, you get a rehab badge.
yeah, well, there's if you drink a beer in the morning or something before 10 o'clock, it's like a top of the morning to your badge or something like
what?
that.
Okay, I gotta get on this.
It's so good.
That
and
sounds
it's
fun.
Like
Can you be friends with people on it? Like,
yeah.
Oh man, I'm adding you.
I'll get with the link, and but like any possible reason for a badge, they've got it. So it's based on volume, it's based on the type of beer, so lagers, pilsners, ales, whatever, where the beers are from. So I might, if I'm lucky, get a Greek badge. I don't know, maybe, because
yeah.
we're drinking some. They're actually not as bad as I thought, but we're drinking Fix Hellas.
It actually went down pretty smooth. I've got to say,
Premium lager beer.
I was a fan.
Yeah. So so you collect these badges and just
Great.
it's like this dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And so you check it in and you don't know what you're going to get, and then suddenly bing 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 bing, and you get all these badges. Like, oh my god, like I'm on level 17 of taking a photo of my beer or whatever it is. And it's literally like you got to collect them all.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and it also rewards you for not just the beer, but where you're drinking it and where you're buying it from as well. So if you go and check in a beer that you have at a restaurant, you might eventually get some sort of food badge.
Yeah.
Or if you're drinking beers at the airport, you'll get an airport badge. It does the pub locations. Some pubs have actually registered themselves for Untapped as well as a beer venue or whatever. And it's insane.
Yeah, I mean,
It's insane.
You've
and
sold me.
And you
already.
can look, and I'm just like selling the people who are listening now, so I'm just getting on a roll here. You can also see people in your area that are also checking in as well.
Yep.
So if you're a total loner and you've got no friends and you're just an alcoholic at home,
Yep.
you can potentially befriend somebody else in the area that's checking in their beers and go, hey, I like beer too.
Oh, that's kind
I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah,
but,
it's simultaneously sweet, but also like the saddest.
scary.
thing.
It's pretty worrying. It's
Yeah.
encouraging a little bit of alcohol consumption for sure. But yeah, so that's been a lot of fun, and living in the city is just like, oh man, like not only do I go and try to experience as many pubs as I can, but I'm trying to go to every bottle shop I possibly can.
Okay.
Because every bottle shop's different. They've got
Yeah,
different arrangement of beers and whatever it is, and so I'm trying to find things. And
Well, you
find these
mentioned
little
that
pockets.
one that you got this from in
Yeah.
Leichhardt. There's one right near me that it has kind of a similar vibe, and it's in sort of the alleyway that goes between. I think it's called Brisbane Street. It's between Oxford Street and then that sort of Surrey Hills cop shop. I think it's Goulburn Street. And but yeah, it's just a big warehouse. And I walked in there one day. I think I was on my lunch break at work, and I was like, I'll get some beers for later. And it seemed like I shouldn't have been there, like it seemed like a wholesale place, but it was like,
Oh, right.
oh, you're welcome. But when I walked in there, he looked at me like, the fuck are you doing here? Like, only trucks. You enter via a big ramp that looks like
really?
truck thing, and then it's legitimately just a warehouse, and it just shit every like. There's no rhyme or reason to the place. It's just like there's a case of beer there, there's a case of beer over there. There's like loose liquor bottles, like, and you just pick one up and like, can I have this? And he's like, yeah. And it's like the whole thing is supposed to be cheap, but it's the same price as every other place. But yeah, I'd kind of just do that awkward, like pop my head in, like, am I allowed to be doing? All right, I'm walking up the ramp, and I get in there, and the guy looks at me like he's never seen another human. It wasn't in a truck because I could see it was a lot of vans will go up, and I guess they do a lot of wholesale.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it reminded me of like the guy behind the counter. He looked like someone out of like a Guy Ritchie film.
Yeah, okay.
You know, he just had that kind of like vibe. Like, what is going on here? I always want to ask, like, I'm such a nosy Nelly. I always just want to pop my head in somewhere and be like, what is this?
Yeah,
what's going on?
Yeah, who are you? What's your story?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll have to find out where that place is.
Strange.
That sounds...
It's an odd spot. But yeah.
Has it got sort of lots of different types of beers, or is it sort of more stock standard sort of stuff? Or
it kind of had a bit of a selection, but it didn't look like they were catering for people who want to buy alcohol.
Yeah, right. Okay.
If that makes sense. It was either a front, or they're like, we have our stock, like we supply this restaurant, this bar, and this, and that's our customers. It wasn't set out like, I've been to places where it's like, they're big on beer, and the people who work there are very knowledgeable, and they're like, we want you to come in and hey, try this. This place just felt like a shambles. And it was bizarre. There's
a bottle shop down towards Broadway, and it's like a Liquor Stacks or one of the chain ones. And I walked in there one day, and there's a really old guy behind the counter, no one else in there, and I would assume that originally at some point in time it was probably just your typical bottle shop where just, very neat and tidy, got your fridges and your aisles, etc. But this guy sort of just doesn't give a fuck, and there's boxes. It sort of just reminded me of what you're saying. Like, you walk in there and there's just shit everywhere. It's just, there's no arrangement whatsoever. Some stuff's got prices on it, some doesn't. There's stuff that probably has been sitting there for a long time with a layer of dust on boxes. And I just walked in there, I'm like, oh my God, like, what is in here? It's like this treasure hunt. I'm like sort of digging through these boxes trying to find different beers, and it was just like the weirdest thing, because it's just like a typical chain store, and I sort of think, does someone from like, I don't know, whoever owns Liquor Stacks or whatever, do they do visits? And sort of go,
is there an area manager
that's
popping in?
It's like, hey Fred, you said you were going to clean up the store about 5 years ago, and it's worse than ever. What are you doing? Leave me alone, they still buy it. So I do that. I do a lot of bottle shop hopping and just checking out what's around. So
are you a regular in any? Like, do you pop in and they're like, hey Andy, how you going?
No. Well, I want to get to that point with Amato's at Leichhardt. That's my go-to now. Yeah. But no, the other day there's a little friendly grocer place here that sells booze, and I walked in there, and the guy behind the counter, he said, oh, you like pale ales? And I'm like, yeah, they're not bad. He said, have you tried this? And I said, no. I said, I tried to like get one of everything. He's like, oh, cool. And then he goes, oh, I just got this new Cooper's one, which was whatever it was. He's like, here, take it home and let me know. And I'm like, oh, thanks so much. And that was like 2 weeks ago. I'm too scared to go back. It was a good beer, but right. I feel like now there's a commitment there, and it's good marketing for him, and it's a good way to sell because he's trying to build loyalty. But now I feel obliged. And so I'm too scared to walk back in there. Like, even to go and get something that's not alcohol, just in case he sees me and goes, oh, what'd you think of that beer? And I'm like, oh, I'm not here to buy beer. I'm here to buy some bread or something like that. So I haven't found my go-to yet, but I think Amato's at Leichhardt's.
That's the spot.
Yeah, and I have to drive there as well, which is good because walking distance is just a little bit too dangerous.
Yeah, of course.
And Amato's is like next level. It's the mecca of...
Well, that's a plan. You got to make a plan to go to Amato's, maybe get some Italian, go to Palace on Norton Street, do the whole Norton Strip, and then I come home, as opposed to being like, it's 10 a.m. and I've drank 2 beers and now I want another beer.
That's right. It certainly happened.
I remember living on Iredale Street, which runs parallel to King Street. It's right near the Union Hotel on King Street. And there was a couple of times, because it was like, I lived there was like Nat, my girlfriend, me, and Nat's girlfriend would often be there, but we'd also just have, at any given time, just there'd be like 5 people over, and it was just always, it'd be like a Sunday, and I work full time, so I would, it'd be like 11 on a Sunday, and I'd be like, yeah, fuck it, I'll have another glass of wine, why not? And there were a few times where it was like 10, I think the liquor store or like the takeaway section of the Union stopped selling it. I think it was 11. So it'd be like 10:55, and I'd be out there in my slippers and robe, just like running down the road, like, couple more bottles of wine, we're still partying. And just, waking up the next day like, you shouldn't have done that.
That was the worst. I lived in Marrickville for a bit, and also lived in St. Peter's, a couple streets back from Southern Cross Hotel on Princess Highway.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the best times of my life, but so dangerous because there's so many people. I'm sure it's the same for you. Like, I mean, just mentioning people always around. There's just so many of your friends that live in that sort of Marrickville, Newtown, and more St. Peter's sort of area. And so there's just always something going on. And either you're at a pub or the pub's at home or whatever it is. And those Sunday sessions were brutal because it would start off really chilled, especially in summer, it was great. And it gets to a point where it's that sort of, a sensible person would just stop and go, all right,
it's Sunday.
Gonna chill out now. But 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't do that. Probably 10 times out of 10, you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it gets to about 8 p.m. at night, and you're like, fuck the man. Life's too short to be worrying about jobs and stuff. This is what life's all about. Mates and beers and just having a great time. And then fast forward to like 7 a.m. the next morning, and you're on the bus or whatever, or a train going into the city, and you're just like...
reeking of booze.
Yeah, it's just coming out of the pores of your arms, and you're just like, oh... why am I such a piece of shit?
I reckon my biggest hangovers are Mondays.
Yeah,
because I'm deadly on that fucking Sunday sesh.
Yeah,
because it's one of those ones where even a Saturday, there's something about the Saturday night, so you don't start early. But for whatever reason, Sunday, it'll be like 11:30 a.m. and you're like, the sun's up. You're damn right, I'm cracking a beer, and that means you're drinking for 12, 13 hours and then going to bed. I still, to this day, I'm a bit more sensible now, but I've had some Mondays sitting at my desk questioning my whole life, just going, what have I done? What am I doing?
I did that yesterday. Yesterday afternoon, about 1-ish or whatever, I thought, no, I'll have a beer. And it's always okay if you're drinking. This sounds horrible what I'm about to say. I'm already preempting what's about to come out of my mouth. It's all right when you're drinking by yourself.
Okay,
but
I'm with it.
Only because you're just drinking at your own pace and you're chilled and you're not sort of like when you're talking, you're hyped up with somebody else and you're sort of going, oh, you want another one, and so that gets out of control really quickly. But I was just chilled and just sort of drinking. But then it came to like 9 o'clock last night. And I'm like, oh man, this has been like a solid fucking, few hours of me just sitting on the couch, watching shit on YouTube and just drinking beer after beer after beer. And I'm like, oh, I'm pissed. Fuck. All right. Okay.
Yeah. That's a fun time though. Like the accidental piss.
Yeah. It wasn't an intentional sort of like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get wrecked. They're the most dangerous ones where you don't sort of have the plan to go and get pissed, especially if you meet up with a mate. It's like, I'm just going to have a couple,
Absolutely.
And it's just like, fuck it, I'll cancel those plans.
Have you ever done, I remember doing this a bit like when I was, sort of 18, 19 in, back in Canberra, doing the thing where you meet up with someone and it starts off accidental. It's just like, oh, fuck, I didn't know you were going to be here. Yeah, fuck it, I'll get a beer. And then the moment where you just call in sick for the next day, like, and that feeling of like, I'm the freest man on the planet. Like, I don't think I'm going to be able to come in tomorrow. It's 9 o'clock. And then you're just like having the fucking rager.
Yeah.
That's some of the funnest times.
Just the
weight off the shoulders of just like, I have nothing to do tomorrow. I can sleep. I can sleep in.
Oh, the lack of what you think are your lack of responsibilities.
Yeah.
Like, God, who cares? Who cares? Yeah, man. Now it's got me pumped to smash some more.
Put them away. Yeah. A couple of fix. Get your
fix.
Hellers. Get your fix of the fix.
Yeah. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Fix Hellers. Probably a really good thing to talk about because I am aware I'm holding a mic and we're recording, but it's probably a good thing to talk about your podcast that you do.
Yeah.
And just not to just plug, but well done. Like it's a really fucking funny podcast.
Oh, thanks, man.
And one thing I'm jealous about is like you guys have got the dynamic of everyone together. It's not just like for me, like with my podcast, it's just me and then whoever I get to talk to, which is good, but there's not that sort of ongoing banter and bouncing off each other.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Do you want to describe what the podcast is for anyone who's not familiar?
Absolutely. I mean, it's called Community Notice Board, which came like actually I've had this idea for years and years. I've always wanted to have a podcast called Community Notice Board, and originally I was actually going to do it with Nat, and my idea was to go through the Facebook Community Notice Board groups and find drama and sort of do a bit of a recap. Well, it wasn't a couple of years ago. They've kind of cleaned them up a little. Right. The moderator's really good at, and there's all these tricky issues of libel and sort of. It's a real person. You don't want to cause any trouble for them. But that was because I love them. I'm a member of so many, and just they crack me up. Just people's insane drama, and I think it was all. There was a post where someone was like, "Does anybody? It was in the Canberra one. Does anybody in Canberra hear that weird buzzing noise?" And then there was this huge thread of just people arguing for no reason. And then right at the end, it was just an old lady, and she was like, "Never mind, it was just my fridge." I was like, "This rules." I like. And so for ages, I had that idea bouncing around my head, and then, obviously, in March, lockdown. Both my co-hosts Jamie Kirk and Alex White, we were all do stand up, so we did all our gigs just get wiped out, calendars gone, and it just got to a point where we're like, we want to do something. You need like a creative outlet. Yeah. So let's do a podcast. And I pitched the idea to the boys, and then we thought instead of just focusing, so narrowly on something, we'd get people and just talk about the town or the suburb that they grew up in. Ideally, town. That's my favorite episodes is when it's someone who grew up in a tiny town you've never heard of, with the kind of conceit being everybody knows. Growing up, there's always a weird person, like you say, dreadlock guy. We just want to talk about or give the listener a sense of growing up in a place where it's like there's weird people, there's weird drama, there's the building that is abandoned, but we all think it's haunted. You know what I mean? Just those fun stories that you pass around when you're a kid. So that's kind of that's the vibe of it.
It's cool. I mean, so it's whoever your guest is, it's where they've grown up. Yeah, and that's sort of the focal point of the episode.
We do a lot of research, which is fun. Even the start of this podcast with the history of Sydney, a lot of the stuff I was talking about was from episodes we've done where I've had to research the history of a place. Or there's one in about 3 weeks. I don't know when this is going to come out, but I think it's in 3 weeks. The episode we recorded the other day, where it was someone from Perth, a comedian, Beck Charwood. She's very funny. She's got a great podcast as well. But we went down this rabbit hole because there was a marine park in the 80s that ended up getting shut down because they changed the regulation of what size pool had to house a dolphin.
Oh right, okay.
So they had them in these tiny, it was quite cruel. But what happened was they rehomed all the dolphins. They actually got them back in the wild, but 3 of them just didn't take because they'd been raised in captivity. And you're essentially sending them to their death. And then someone poisoned these dolphins, and it's a mystery to this day. And I ended up getting on Facebook and tracking down someone who used to work at the park, and her and I just had this conversation for 2 hours via chat, and
wow.
She gave me all these great stories from the thing. So yeah, that kind of stuff I love. I get right into the research.
That's cool because especially for your guest who grows up there, there's probably no doubt a bunch of stuff that they don't even know about their own place. Exactly. And then you guys just show them up and say, "Did you know this?" What? No way.
They're some of our favorite parts. We're have you ever heard of this? And they're like, "Do tell." And it's some weird, either somebody, a lot of the funniest things I think come from just in the 1800s, just these absolute weird units who would found towns or found businesses, and you know, they have these crazy fucking stories because it's the 1800s and you could just do anything then. Like there's just no rules. Like it was bizarre.
There's a bunch of towns all over the country, but there's heaps where you'll have somebody who either discovered the town or was one of the first sort of main sort of business owners, and they kind of half own the town because they'll, at one point they were the cop, next minute they were running the post office, and they were running, the local car dealership and whatever it might be. Yeah. And there's actually I won't mention it because I think it's pretty recent actually, but there is a large regional town in New South Wales where there is a guy who owns a dealership, and he is like the equivalent of this. And basically he's got enough leverage to just get whatever he wants. And so, if there's a problem in town, he'll just deal with it. Wow. And he said, just don't worry about it. It's just the weirdest thing. And you're like, hang on, like, is this like, are we in the 20s or something like that? What's going on? But no, it's like 2020. Like this is, so, I think it's just a different world when you go to some of these smaller places, like, or just outside the city areas where it's a little bit more, once you get underneath the initial layer of, this is a nice quaint town, and blah, 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 and you start talking to the locals, and then that's when you get your stories and you go,
you get the juicy goss.
Oh my God, this is awesome.
And we've had problems with, like, it's supposed to be a comedy podcast. Of course, we're going to be poking fun at the town, but it's never our intention to go there and just shit on a place. Yeah. But we have had, like, we had an episode in Billawheeler in Queensland.
Yeah, wow.
With just another great local comedian. She grew up in Billawheeler, Michelle Azevedo. But I posted, because we record them on YouTube as well, so I posted the video into the Billawheeler community group, and I said, hey, check this out if you're interested. We sort of talk about the history of the place, blah, blah, blah. And initially, a lot of likes, a lot of people. And then, like, I think a day later, someone was like, has anyone watched this? It's so mean. Like, I can't believe like how mean they're being about the town. And then someone was like, yeah, I knew Michelle. Her and her family. It's a shame she thinks she's so much better than us. And I'm like, oh, no. So I had to like quickly delete it. But there was a lot of people who, there was like the loud majority loud vocal minority who just hated it because they thought we were making fun of their town.
Yeah.
Which like we were, but like we also tried to paint a picture of the town as a whole. We were just making fun of them because they got a subway really late. And they were just furious about that. But then there was like people who clearly liked it, who were just like, supporting us but not jumping in to be like, settle down, guys.
It's kind of like the sporting team mentality. It's like, don't mess with my team. I don't care. I don't even care if you're right. Yeah. You just don't go absolutely. There,
I'm the same with my town. Like, 'cause I grew up in Queanbeyan. I hang shit on Queanbeyan all day, but if some fucking Canberra prick is like, Queanbeyan sucks, I'm like, all right, shut your
mouth. I'll keep an eye on the time, but just on this, and Bill Wheeler, because I was born in Redcliffe, lived in a place called Cunnamulla, which is like 10 hours west. Yeah, west. I'm thinking of my directions. West of Brisbane. Lived in Emerald, lived in Rockhampton, and then back to Redcliffe. Yeah. And but Cunnamulla, I don't know if you're familiar with Cunnamulla.
I'm not, no.
So I think Billawheeler's like north. Well, I'm probably getting geography wrong, but like northeast, several hours or whatever.
Yep.
But there's a documentary called Cunnamulla, and it was like an ABC documentary back in the late 90s, I think. And so a couple of guys went out there, and they just interviewed the local people and just talked about the town, and that was their whole premise behind it. And so people were happy to talk about their stories and what goes on in town.
Yeah.
But they actually documented the darker side of town, and basically went for the people who are a little bit crazy and some of the drama. And there was like underage girls talking about how they get around town and have sex with everybody. They were talking about all the just different people with drug and alcohol problems. And then there's like one taxi in town, and he's this old guy in his 80s, and he's got this beautiful old, like, I can't remember what kind of car, but just say it was an old Holden or something like that. Beautiful, like just kept in immaculate condition. But he's driving around town, and he's like just making all these like racist comments about the Aboriginal population. And it's just like one after the other. And it's the most entertaining, comical train wreck.
Yeah.
So they go out there, they film it, none the wiser. They go back to Brisbane or wherever. They release it through the ABC, and then Cunnamulla discovers it, and they just said, if these guys come back to town, we're going to shoot them. And they became like public enemy number one.
Oh.
And it's just it's so crazy and it's so good. And so like just you sort of talking about that just makes me think of like these guys who did a similar thing.
I have the fear of, because we would love if we can get enough of a fan base together, we'd love to do the live, go and do a live podcast somewhere. But there is that thing of like, if we did an episode of Norfolk Island and we really went to town on it. And like it would be one of those things where I would not be surprised if I went there and someone just beat the shit out of me.
And I think after that Shit Towns of Australia Facebook thing, I think that sort of probably raised the awareness of some of these smaller towns, just going, there are people out there that will want to take advantage of our town or something like that.
Absolutely.
Because I've got a million ideas of like going out and doing like little video series of different towns on different topics, like the real dumb statues and monuments. Like when you go through town, you're like, why is there a statue of a fucking dog? What's that plaque mean? And so you find the story behind it. But I'm just thinking, can you imagine me walking through this tiny little town with like a camera, even if it's just myself, a tiny little indiscreet sort of thing, a discreet sort of setup, but someone will just be looking around going, you're up to no good. I know you're up to no good.
Yeah.
Get out of town,
You get chased out with pitchforks.
Get the rifle, pitchfork. So anyway, it's look, a bit of danger could be good.
Yeah.
Keep you on your toes, and
Absolutely.
it might help with the ratings. Get a few more viewers.
Bit of adrenaline.
That's it. But yeah, man, appreciate you coming around.
No, thanks for having me. It's very fun.
Worries. It's
and thanks for the beer.
Oh, no worries. There's plenty more. We might have another one, but mate, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Catch you later.
All right, so you listen to this podcast right now either on YouTube or you're listening to it through a podcast player right now. So, call to action, as I usually do with anybody that's on the podcast that has their own podcast. Go to the little search function. That's right. I mean, if you're driving, just wait until you're pulled over and the keys are out of the ignition, all the legal stuff is sorted. But, go to the search function, type in Community Notice Board Podcast or just Community Notice Board, and subscribe, follow, whatever the little button is to keep up to date with new episodes of that podcast. Go and listen to one of the episodes. The latest episode is probably a good place to start. And get amongst it. And reach out to Drew as well. I'll have the links to Drew's socials and, of course, the podcast in the show notes, in the description of this episode. And reach out and say hi. Like anybody who's been on the podcast over the past almost 5.5 years. It's been a long time. We're at 257 episodes. That's a lot of talking, and that's a lot of people. And Drew's the first one off the ranks for 2021, so a great way to kick off the year. So there you go. Make sure you reach out to him and say hello. Now, 2021. Now, I am actually recording this in 2020, so I'm living in the past at the moment, but I'm predicting that 2021 is going to be absolutely fantastic. What a year. Oh, it already feels amazing. Oh, I can't wait for this year. All the plans I have, all the plans that we all have. It's going to be incredible. But Patreon. Now, this is your New Year's resolution. If you're not on Patreon already, your New Year's resolution is to support Andy Social by jumping on and, at the bare minimum, jumping on the $1 tier. $1 a month. Dirt cheap. Set and forget. You won't even know. And if all of you that listen to this podcast jumped on the $1 tier, oh, shit. Fucking hell. Life would be great. It's just the sky's the limit. The things that I would do, the dreams that could become reality, it'd be incredible. But either way, there's a $1 tier, there's a $5 tier, there's a $10 tier, and there's even a $20 tier if you're absolutely manic, you're crazy. But you absolutely love me in the podcast. There's a couple of guys who do that, and they're legends. But there's a multiple tier system there, and anything over the $1 tier gets you access to the exclusive Patreon podcast that comes out every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. I'm going to do a whole bunch of fun things in the new year, or this year, whenever you listen to this podcast. We've got Team Chronoplan. If you don't know that, you can go to Patreon and go and check that out. And we put out some T-shirts. People are starting to get those T-shirts now. And I'm going to do some more wacky merch, some fun stuff. And I'm going to spitball some ideas with the Patreon community to do some extra things. So lots of things in the pipeline, lots of ideas. And jumping onto Patreon not only helps create the new ideas, but it just helps keep Andy Social functioning, running. All the costs that go into running a podcast, the editing, the hosting, the merchandise, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. The gear, getting around town, just all the little things that add up to running a podcast. And everyone that jumps on board with Patreon just takes the pressure off big time. They're massive supporters. So thank you very much to everyone who has jumped on. And this list might be a little bit out of date, so apologies if you jumped on in the past couple of weeks, but a massive thank you to... and in particular, these are the people that are on my $10 and $20 tier. So shout outs to these people in particular. Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto. We've also got Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, Chris from Sydney, Brendo from Leeton, Tim from Canberra, James from Brisbane, and Christian from Canberra as well. Thank you very much, guys, for jumping on the $10 and $20 tiers. Just carrying the load, like big time, just absolute legends. And a massive thank you, of course, to everybody else that's on the $1 and the $5 tiers. For some reason, Tom Tanaki managed to work out a $2 tier that I didn't even know existed, but that's what he's doing. He's a unique guy. Go back and listen to his episode last year on the podcast. He's an absolute legend, but he's on the $2 tier for whatever reason. So maybe you can just make up your own tier. You can have a $666 fucking Patreon tier a month. I mean, maybe not do that. Maybe a $6.66, I don't know. Anyway, patreon.com/Andy Dowling is the place to go and check all that out. And of course, all the links will be in the show notes as well. But there we go. That's it. 2021. Here we go. A lot of waffling. A lot of waffling to come. Next week's episode is, I don't know. I've got a stack load of musicians that I've recorded, banked up. Lots of legends that I'm going to drip feed out into the first few weeks of 2021, but I haven't quite worked out the order yet. So more than likely a musician, maybe a comedian, who knows? Stay tuned. Until next week, folks, thank you so much. Keep sharing it around. Do all the social media love, blah, 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 blah. Take care. Ta-ta. Bye-bye.